The instant the red wine splashed across my face, time seemed to stretch. I felt the warm, sticky liquid seeping into my dress, the sharp aroma of ripe berries and alcohol filling my nose. Around the dinner table, gasps rippled like distant thunder, shocked, uncertain, but nobody moved. No one spoke. And then, laughter. His laughter. Why do you always have to be such an idiot? Lucas smirked, swirling the rest of his wine as if he'd just delivered the punchline of the century. His friends exchanged hesitant chuckles, unsure whether to join in or pretend they hadn't seen. My throat tightened. My cheeks burned, not just from the wine, but from the humiliation. This dinner was supposed to be a simple gathering, an evening where I played the part of the supportive wife, smiling and laughing in all the right places. Instead, I had become the evening's entertainment. Every pair of eyes was on me, waiting, watching, expecting a reaction. I inhaled slowly, dabbed my face with my napkin, and rose to my feet, measured, steady, in complete control. "Excuse me," I said, voice even, betraying nothing. Without another glance, I turned and walked away, ignoring the murmurs that followed. Inside, my heart pounded, my hands trembled, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crack. I left the restaurant and drove home alone. Lucas didn't come after me. He was too busy basking in the attention, effortlessly turning the moment into another joke, keeping his friends entertained, brushing off their discomfort. This wasn't the first time he had put me down in public. It had started small, dismissing my opinions in conversation, making sarcastic comments about my photography business. But lately, the remarks had sharpened, cutting deeper, carrying a crueler edge. And now this. A spectacle, performed at my expense. Yet as I sat in the dim glow of our kitchen, staring at the reflection of myself in the darkened window, I found myself asking the same question I always did. Was it really that bad? That part of me, the part that clung to excuses, whispered that he hadn't meant it, that he was just stressed, that maybe I had embarrassed him first. I hated that voice. But tonight, something shifted. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. What I felt now was something far more dangerous. Clarity. It was past midnight when I heard the front door open. Lucas's steps echoed down the hall, unhurried. I could picture him, tie loosened, still glowing from the evening, expecting to find me sulking, maybe crying, waiting for him to wrap his arms around me and say something dismissive. "You know I was just joking, babe. Don't be so sensitive. You embarrassed yourself more by making a big deal out of it." I had heard it all before. But tonight, there would be no argument, no pleading for an apology, no second chances. He stepped into the kitchen and spotted me at the table, laptop open, pen in hand, scribbling something in my notebook. His smirk wavered. "What are you doing?" I lifted my head, my expression unreadable. "Making a list." His brow furrowed. "A list of what?" Gently, deliberately, I shut the notebook. "Everything you've ever done to me." A laugh escaped him, uncertain and forced. "Come on, Claire. Don't be ridiculous." I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. A video played. His smirk disappeared entirely. It was the dinner party. Someone had recorded it, and now, so had I. His laughter, clear and cruel. The splash of wine against my dress. My silent, dignified exit. The expressions on his friends' faces, some amused, others deeply uncomfortable. His fingers clenched against the countertop. His easy confidence flickered. Who recorded this? Does it matter? I held his gaze. They sent it to me. Thought I should have a copy. For the first time, I saw something new behind his irritation, fear. Lucas had built his entire identity on charm, on being the guy everyone liked. He wasn't the smartest or the most hardworking, but he was the one people wanted to grab a drink with, the one who always knew the right joke for the moment. But this was different. "Delete it," he said, his voice tightening. "Now." I tilted my head. "Why? It's just a joke, right?" His jaw clenched. He raked a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Claire, you're blowing this out of proportion. Nobody cares about this kind of thing." It was just a joke, I echoed, voice calm, controlled. Tell me, Lucas, if I had done the same to you, would it still be funny? His lips pressed into a thin, pale line. Because we both knew the answer. If the roles had been reversed, if I had humiliated him in front of his friends, thrown a drink in his face, and laughed at his expense, he would have stormed out. He would have called me unhinged, embarrassing, unstable. But Lucas had spent years making sure I believed his words were always jokes. And my feelings? Nothing more than overreactions, not anymore. Lucas let out a forced laugh, but I could see the cracks forming beneath his usual confidence. What exactly is this, Claire? Some kind of punishment? You're being ridiculous. I picked up my notebook, flipping through the pages slowly, deliberately. Do you know what this is? I asked, tapping my fingers against the worn cover. He scoffed. A diary of every time I pissed you off? Close, I replied, meeting his gaze. It's a record of every insult, every lie, every moment you made me feel small. I held up the pages. I've been keeping track, Lucas. And guess what? There's a pattern. For a brief second, something in his expression shifted, uncertainty flickering behind the usual bravado. Then, just as quickly, he rolled his eyes. Jesus, Claire, you need to stop watching those dramatic self-help videos. This is insane. Is it? I took a step closer. Because it wasn't insane when I sat there, silent, letting you treat me like a background character in your life. It wasn't insane when you made me believe I should be grateful to have you, instead of the other way around. And then I saw it. The moment it truly hit him. This wasn't just another fight. I wasn't upset. I was finished. Lucas exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Fine. You're mad. I get it. So what now? You plan to hold this video over my head forever? I already said I was sorry. I tilted my head. You actually haven't. He let out an exasperated sigh. Fine. I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have done it. Can we move on now? There it was. Not remorse, just frustration that I wasn't sweeping it under the rug like I always had. Moving on. I let the words sit on my tongue, testing them. Lucas's shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. That's all I'm asking. I smiled. Oh, I wasn't talking about us. I meant me. Moving on. His head snapped up. What? I called a lawyer today. I let the words settle between us. For a moment, he just blinked at me, like I had spoken in a foreign language. You're not serious. I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward him. A list of legal consultations stared back at him. Very serious. Lucas gave a short, hollow laugh. You're overreacting. You're really going to throw away our marriage over this? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the marriage where you belittle me in public? The one where you make me feel invisible? I didn't ruin it, Lucas. You did. I'm just done pretending otherwise. His jaw tightened. He dragged a hand over his face, pacing the kitchen. What do you want? His voice turned sharp, etched with something dangerously close to desperation. You want me to get on my knees and beg? Is that what this is about? I shook my head. I don't want anything from you, Lucas. That's the whole point. He laughed again, but there was no amusement behind it. You won't go through with this. You're just being dramatic. I smiled. Wait and see. I turned toward the hallway, but before I left, I glanced over my shoulder. Oh, and Lucas? My voice was light, almost casual. If I were you, I'd think twice before joking about this in front of your friends. I met his gaze, unblinking. You never know who else has a copy of that video. I didn't wait for a response. For the first time in years, I didn't care what he had to say. I just walked away. Lucas didn't come after me, not immediately. That wasn't his way. He liked to win, to wear me down with charm, with guilt, with just enough remorse to keep me from leaving. He probably told himself I'd cool off, that I'd wake up in the morning full of regret. He was wrong. I barely slept that night, but not because I was second-guessing myself. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. My mind was still racing, my heart still raw, but beneath it all was certainty. A quiet, immovable resolve. I was leaving. And this time, he wouldn't talk me out of it. By the time I stepped into the kitchen the next morning, Lucas was already there, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee in hand. He watched me, waiting for an apology, maybe, or some indication that I was ready to smooth things over. I gave him nothing. So, he finally said, setting his mug down with a dull thud. You had your little moment. Feeling better now? I took a deep breath, keeping my expression neutral. I'm not having a moment, Lucas. He scoffed. Right. So you're still on this ridiculous divorce talk, huh? I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to the cabinet, grabbed my own mug. I wasn't playing his game. That's what he wanted, for me to snap, to argue, to give him an opening to make this my fault. If he could get me to explode, then he could spin it into me being irrational, unreasonable. When I didn't take the bait, his tone shifted. Claire, come on. 8 years of marriage, and you're really going to throw it all away over one stupid night. This time, I faced him directly. I'm not throwing anything away, Lucas. You did that a long time ago. Something flickered across his face then, just for a second. Fear. He masked it quickly, replacing it with irritation, but I had seen it. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, he said, his voice sharp now. You really think anyone cares about that video? My friends were laughing, Claire. Nobody is taking this as seriously as you are. I leaned against the counter, watching him. You sure about that? His smirk faltered. I pulled out my phone, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward him. His brow furrowed. What's this? Check the comments, Lucas. The video, the one his friend had recorded, had made its way into their private group chat. The same chat where they swapped sports bets, inside jokes, and office gossip. But this time, the messages weren't what he expected. Man, that was hard to watch. Dude, that wasn't funny at all. Kinda messed up. Is Claire okay? I watched his eyes skim the screen, his fingers tightening around the phone. Why are you showing me this? He snapped. Because you seem convinced that your friends thought it was hilarious. Turns out, not everyone agrees. His jaw clenched. His fists balled at his sides. Lucas hated looking bad. He cared more about perception than anything else, more than me, more than our marriage. He needed to be liked, admired. And now, for the first time, he was realizing that maybe, just maybe, people hadn't been laughing with him. They'd been laughing at him. His voice dropped, low and seething. All right. You made your point. You embarrassed me. Congratulations. Now delete the damn video. I took a slow sip of coffee, studying my heartbeat. No. His expression darkened. Excuse me? I'm not deleting it, Lucas. And I'm not staying with you. He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. You really think you're the only one who can play games? Fine. You want to go through with this? Go ahead. But don't think for a second I'm just going to roll over and let you take everything. And there it was. The real Lucas. The mask slipping, the charming, easygoing husband, the one who cracked jokes and played the perfect guy, was just a facade. Beneath it, he was exactly what I had feared. A man who needed control. I built this life too, he continued, stepping closer. You think you can just walk away and leave me with nothing? You better think twice, sweetheart. I met his gaze, refusing to let him see the flicker of unease settling in my chest. You're right, Lucas, I said softly. You did build this life. I hope you enjoy it. His frown deepened. What the hell does that mean? I set my coffee down, grabbed my bag, and walked to the door. Before stepping out, I turned back just long enough to land the final blow. Oh, and Lucas? I said lightly. You might want to check your bank account. Then I left. The confusion and anger on his face were the first signs that Lucas was unraveling. The next came just 2 hours later. I was sitting in a quiet cafe, enjoying a latte, when my phone buzzed on the table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Lucas. What the hell did you do? I took my time finishing my sip before unlocking my phone. Claire. Answer me. Now. I set the phone down and smiled. I wasn't going to respond. Not yet. Let him sweat. I already knew what he had just discovered. Last week, when I first started planning my exit, I moved half of our shared savings into an account under my name. Legally, I was entitled to it. I had earned just as much as he had. The difference? I had been smart enough to prepare. I had also removed myself as a co-signer on his credit card and frozen our joint account. If he wanted money, he would have to rely on his own. And that was a problem. Because Lucas was terrible with money. He lived like a king on payday and complained like a pauper by the end of the month. Expensive nights out, overpriced gadgets, status symbol purchases just to impress his friends, it all drained him faster than he realized. Now, he had to face the consequences. I checked my phone again. Claire, you took our money? Are you insane? Lucas, I swear to God, fix this. Now. I exhaled slowly, satisfaction settling deep in my bones. So it had been our money when I took half. But when he spent thousands on nonsense, that was just his right. Typical. And then came the next blow. This one landed even harder than the first. I didn't have to wait long to hear about it. That afternoon, my friend Sophie called, her voice practically vibrating through the phone. Claire, please tell me you've seen it. Seen what? I asked, even though I already had a feeling. The post. I opened the group chat, Sophie, and I shared with a few mutual friends. The moment I saw the screenshot, my breath caught. Lucas's boss had posted something. No names mentioned, but it was obvious who it was about. A man who can't respect his wife in private won't respect anyone in business either. Actions have consequences. Lucas's boss had been at that dinner party. And apparently, he hadn't left. The comment section was already filling up. Wow! People really show their true colors sometimes. Humiliating your own wife in public? Yikes. Glad I know who not to work with. Lucas had never been the best at his job, but he had been likable. That was his strength. He charmed people. Made them laugh. Made them believe he was the guy to invite for drinks after work. But charm only works if people don't see through it. And now, the cracks were showing. Because when you expose someone for who they really are, the people who once admired them don't just stop laughing. They start seeing the truth. And Lucas? He was unraveling. I was still scrolling through the fallout when my phone rang. His name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. I popped in my earbuds and pressed play. Claire, what the hell is going on? His voice was tense, barely restrained fury crackling through the speaker. My boss won't return my calls. People are treating me like some kind of monster because of you. A pause. A sharp inhale. Then, a quieter, almost pleading tone. This is beyond petty. This is cruel. You're ruining my life over a damn joke. And there it was. The shift. From rage to guilt, from blame to manipulation. A well-worn pattern, one I knew by heart. Come on, babe. I didn't mean it like that. You know that. I closed my eyes. I knew that tone too well. The desperate reach, the last-ditch effort to pull me back into the cycle. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. By the evening, his messages had changed. The demands had softened into negotiation. Claire, let's talk. Just us. No fighting. Please. I stared at the words for a moment before replying. Fine. Meet me at the house in an hour. Then, I picked up my bag and walked out the door. By the time I arrived, Lucas was already there, pacing the living room. The moment I stepped inside, he exhaled sharply. Okay, he said, as if forcing himself to be calm. Let's be adults about this. Let's talk like normal people. I crossed my arms. Go ahead. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Look, I was an ass. I admit that. His voice was measured, like he was following a script. I was drunk. It was a stupid joke. I didn't mean to hurt you. I raised an eyebrow. You weren't drunk, Lucas. You had half a glass of wine. His jaw tightened. Fine. Whatever. The point is, I messed up. But you're going nuclear here. Cutting off the accounts, turning people against me. What do you want? Revenge? I sighed, tilting my head. No, Lucas. I just want to be done. His expression darkened. So that's it? You're just walking away. Just like that. For the first time, I saw something beyond anger. Something that looked an awful lot like fear. His voice dropped, quieter now. What am I supposed to do, Claire? I shrugged. Figure it out. You always told me I was the problem. Now you get to see what life is like without me. His face hardened. You're going to regret this. I smiled faintly. No, Lucas. You are. I turned and walked toward the door. With each step, I felt lighter, like I was shedding years of weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Just before stepping outside, I paused. Oh, and Lucas? I said, without looking back. You might want to check your email. Then I left. I could already picture it. The way his face would twist as he opened his inbox, scanning the email, rereading the words in disbelief. The way he'd scramble to his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard, hoping, praying, that what he was seeing wasn't real. But it was. By the time I got back to my apartment, the one I had quietly leased 2 months ago when I first started planning my escape, my phone was already vibrating. Lucas. I ignored it. Another call. Then another. By the time he left a voicemail, I was already pouring myself a glass of wine, settling into my new life with a peace I hadn't felt in years. Still, I pressed play. Claire. His voice cracked, rage barely contained. You're out of your damn mind. What the hell did you do? I took a slow sip, savoring the moment. Let's see how he handled this. The email hadn't been sent to him. It had gone straight to his company's HR department. Attached was the video from the dinner party, a crystal-clear display of public humiliation and verbal abuse. I hadn't needed to say much, just a brief, professional message. I am reaching out to formally report my soon-to-be ex-husband, Lucas Bennett, for repeated patterns of verbal and emotional abuse, as demonstrated in the attached footage. This is only one instance, but it reflects an ongoing issue that has impacted both his personal and professional reputation. Given your company's stated values, I felt it was important that this behavior be acknowledged. I knew exactly what I was doing. Lucas worked for a company that prided itself on corporate ethics and leadership accountability. They ran workshops on workplace respect, diversity, and inclusion. Their HR team took PR disasters very seriously. And now, they had a problem sitting right at one of their executive desks. Lucas wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. Claire. His voice was frantic, stripped of the confidence he always carried. I said nothing. You sent that email? He sounded breathless, almost panicked. Are you serious? Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done, I said, voice calm. I made sure they saw you for who you really are. God, Claire, this is my career. His words came in sharp, ragged bursts. What the hell is wrong with you? I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Oh, now it matters? Now you care about consequences? I let the silence stretch before adding, funny. Because when I was sitting there drenched in wine, listening to you laugh, you didn't seem too concerned about my reputation. That was different. No, I said, cutting him off. It wasn't. His breath hitched. For a moment, I could hear nothing but his frustration, simmering, barely held back. Look, we don't have to do this, he tried again, his voice softer now, laced with desperation. You're mad. I get it. But we can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you overreacted, Claire. Just say it was a misunderstanding, and we can make this all go away. I almost laughed. Even now, he thought I could be convinced. That I could be managed. You still don't get it, do you? I said, my voice calm. I don't want to fix this, Lucas. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. Silence. Then, a whisper strained, almost disbelieving. You're really doing this. I met his words with a quiet certainty. I already did. The fallout was immediate. By morning, Lucas's boss had called him in for an urgent meeting. By afternoon, he was placed on suspension, pending an internal review. By the end of the week, his company released an official statement. Lucas Bennett was no longer employed. He tried to fight it. Argued that it wasn't fair, that it was a private matter, that his wife was just being vindictive. But the video spoke louder than any of his excuses. And it wasn't just his job he lost. His reputation crumbled. Clients pulled out of projects. Colleagues distanced themselves. Friends stopped returning his calls. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about the dinner party. People started remembering the offhand sexist comments, the way he dismissed women in meetings, the microaggressions, the jokes that weren't jokes. His world wasn't falling apart, it was being revealed for what it had always been. And without his power, his charm, his connections, Lucas was nothing. A week after he lost his job, Lucas showed up at my apartment. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I wanted to see him, to look him in the eye one last time. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his usual self-assured stance replaced with something hollow. Desperate. "Claire," he said, voice quieter now. "Can we talk?" I studied him, then echoed the word back to him. Talk? A dry, humorless smile touched my lips. "Like we always did? Were you talking? I sit there and take it." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I messed up, okay? I get that. But this? This is too much." I tilted my head. "Too much?" My voice was light, but my words cut. "You mean like throwing a drink in my face in front of an audience? Like laughing at me while I sat there humiliated? Like treating me like I was less than for years?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I just need some time to fix things," he muttered. I need your help." I almost pitied him. Almost. "You always needed my help, Lucas." I held his gaze. "You just never wanted to admit it." He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess I just thought you'd always be there." I breathed out slowly. "Yeah," I said. "So did I." And then I closed the door in his face. This time, I didn't look back. The lock clicked, sealing him out of my life for good. I leaned against the door, letting the silence settle around me. No more manipulation. No more mind games. No more waiting for an apology that would never come. For the first time in years, I was free. And I had never felt lighter. I didn't have to check in on Lucas to know what happened next. His downfall had been public. The whispers started almost immediately. The same people who once admired him now avoided him. He tried to find another job in his field, but word had spread. His reputation was stained, and in an industry built on relationships, he had burned too many bridges. He wasn't just out of work. He was out of power. The friends who used to laugh at his jokes? They stopped answering his calls. His savings, what little was left, dried up fast. He tried to fight the divorce settlement, but with the evidence I had, even his lawyer advised him to settle quietly. He lost the house. He lost the respect of his peers. And, eventually, he lost himself. Sophie texted me once. Saw Lucas at a bar. Alone. Looked small. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because I didn't care. My life, on the other hand, flourished. The apartment I had moved into wasn't temporary. It was a fresh start. I decorated it exactly the way I wanted. Bright, warm, full of color, no traces of Lucas's cold, modern aesthetic. And my business? It thrived. Without Lucas belittling me. Without him making me question my worth. I poured everything into it. I expanded. I hired more people. And for the first time in a long, long time, I realized just how much I had been holding myself back when I was with him. People started reaching out. Not because of what had happened with Lucas, but because of what I had done afterward. "You're an inspiration," one woman wrote. "I watched your story unfold, and it gave me the courage to leave my own toxic marriage." More messages followed. Women who had once felt trapped, just like I had. Women who had been made to feel small, just like I had. And that's when I understood. My revenge had never been about destroying Lucas. It had been about rebuilding myself. 6 months later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was at a networking event, laughing with new business contacts, when I spotted him across the room. He wasn't wearing the crisp, tailored suits he used to. His tie was loose. His confidence muted. And he was alone. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. But he saw me. And in that moment, I watched something shift in his expression. Regret. Not because he had lost me. Because he had never truly seen me until it was too late. For a split second, I thought he might walk over, try one last time. But he didn't. Because he knew I had one. That night, I went home to my apartment, the one filled with laughter, warmth, and peace. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and exhaled. This time, I wasn't drowning in red wine and humiliation. I was celebrating. Not revenge. Not victory. Freedom. Lucas had thought that throwing that wine in my face was the punchline to some cruel joke. But he was wrong. It wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning.